Okay, arrays. I've been talking about arrays for a while. Arrays are very important. Objects are also very important, and we'll talk about those on Wednesday and Thursday. But arrays, when you're actually in the real world working with, data, when you get data from servers, that data is usually represented in an array. Okay? So, what is an array? That is an array. Open, close, bracket. That is an empty array. Okay? Now, arrays are special. They're a special type. Okay? Well, not really, but arrays can hold anything. This is an array of 3 strings. Like strings, arrays have a length property. And like strings, arrays are also indexed, okay? So if I down here were to console.log array of hobbits at 1, I would get what? Sam, okay? It works the same way as strings. The 0th index is the first item, okay? So if I console.log array of hobbits.length, I get 3. Is everyone with me so far? Does anyone have any questions on why this is a thing? I can't really answer. It's just how it works, okay? Arrays can not only hold strings, but arrays can hold booleans, null, undefined, another array of the string A and the string B, and 123. Arrays can hold anything. They could also hold empty objects. Oh wait. And an empty object is an open, close, curly brace. We'll talk more about that on Wednesday though, okay? But just so you know, arrays can hold any data type, okay? Anything, including more arrays. And those arrays can hold more arrays, okay? It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, so what would happen if I were to console log the type of array of things? What would I get? Wrong. I would get object. This is confusing, okay? But arrays are actually objects, okay? In JavaScript, their type is object, but they behave so differently that we sort of refer to them as their own type, okay? A way how to check if something is actually an array, we can use the global array object. Yes, like strings and booleans and numbers, there is a global array object. And that array object has a method on it, and that is .isArray. And that thing is a function. And you can put this, and you can pass whatever you want into that. I'll pass in an array of hobbits. And I get true. That makes sense, right? Array.isArray, pass something in. Is it an array? It'll say yes or no, true or false. It returns a boolean. Does everyone understand? If you try to check, if you have an object and an array and you do type of, you won't know which one's an array because they both return the same thing. They both return a string of object. So we use a more specific array.isArray, passing something into it, and you get a boolean that reflects whether that thing is an array or not. Any questions? Yeah.
On the slides, it says that we can hold a variable that's different from a string 30 or boolean. What is a variable?
Like that. It can hold anything. And what variables can hold anything, right? You could assign whatever type, whatever property to a variable, right? And you could put that variable into the array. Works the same. Any other questions? Okay. So, I said that you can... I said that arrays are kind of like strings, whereas they have indexes, right? So, that means I can loop through them, right? Array, we'll do array of hobbits dot length. And I could just console.log array of hobbits at I. Oh shit. And I get Frodo, Sam, Bilbo. If array of hobbits was a single string of hobbits and I did the same thing, wouldn't that give me every single character in the string? If you loop through a string, you get every character, right? With arrays, you don't get the character, you get the element, okay? And elements in arrays are separated by commas. So array at index 0 is this entire string Frodo. So when I is 0, which is what we started off on, we get Frodo over here. The for loop increments, I is 1, then we get Sam, and then we get Bilbo, and then the loop is done. Yeah. Yes. You can. We'll talk more about this tomorrow, but there is a way to, when we talk about nested arrays and arrays, but this can be done with strings too. What if I did an array of hobbits at I at 0? FSB. Array of hobbits at I, when I is 0, is Frodo, right? Right? That's the 0th index. So then that means array of hobbits at I is Frodo. Frodo at 0 is F. Does that make sense? It might take a while to get used to, but to go deeper into something, you would just do the bracket again. This is called bracket notation. Accessing elements with brackets. And you're aware of this because that's how you access characters in strings already, right? Let's ignore the 0 for now and just focus on how to access actual elements. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So the array, when you try and find out if something's an array, if you go array is array, what if the array is nested inside a function? Usually that's not accessible.
What do you mean nested in a function?
Like there's a function, and inside the function you have the array, and then outside of the function you say array is array, and you try and find out if it's an array. Can you still access it even though it's inside a function?
Oh,
the hierarchical
with scope?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
If there's a variable defined inside of a function that is an array, and you try and use array.isArray in the global scope to look at that, no, you cannot do that. Because that is defined in its own local scope, its own functional scope, right? You can do that within the function itself, though. Any other questions? Does everyone understand how I'm accessing the elements in this array of hobbits? So, let me ask you guys something. Before I go back into the array of hobbits, I'm going to say let example equal hello, right? And I'm going to console.log example. And we get hello, okay? What if I did this? What if I did example at 0 is now equal to capital F. And I console.log example again. What am I going to see in the terminal? Huh? No, I won't. I will still see hello. I can do this and set this equal to a different variable, but I cannot change what example is. I can't change what that, well, I can't change what example is. I can't change what that string is by reassigning one of its indexes. Because the strings are primitive values and they cannot be mutated. However, arrays are complex data types. Arrays can be mutated. Let's go back. Let me just write here for you guys later. Let's go back to this example, and let's write an if statement inside. If array of hobbits at I is triple equal to Sam. No, Bilbo. If array of hobbits at I is triple equal to Bilbo. What does that exactly mean? Doesn't that mean, well, let me put it down here so you guys can see more. What if, does that mean that as I'm looping through this, anything that goes inside of this code block, inside of this if statement, will run only if the current element of the array is equal to a string of capital B-I-L-B-O. Capital Bilbo, right? So what if I did array of hobbits at I is now going to be equal to Merry. Bilbo is no longer in array of hobbits. I replaced the value. I mutated what array of hobbits was by replacing a value with a different value. And like I said before, I can do this with an array as well. Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin in an array, right? Array of hobbits at 2, and we get an array of Merry and Pippin. At 2 at 1, we get Pippin. But we don't have to talk about that right now. Any questions? Does everybody understand how I'm pulling out elements of the array? The same way you pull out characters of a string, right? Isn't it the same thing? Aren't the indexes lined up the same way? No questions on this? All right. Whatever. What should I tell you now? So, I'll keep my... So, now I want to talk to you guys about methods. There are certain array methods, just like string methods, that are built into JavaScript. Some of them are exactly the same. Those methods include index of, and you pass in an entire string and it gives you 1, right? Because the index of Sam in this array is 1. 0, 1, 2, right? Or wrong? No, it's right, right? Are there any questions at all? Arrays are new, so it's okay to ask questions. Yeah.
I'm a little confused with the last example when you said you can't really modify
A string.
a letter in a string, but then you went to this example and you can modify an element in an array, but I'm just not sure why.
Well, that's because of rules of JavaScript, right? Because arrays and objects are complex data types, which means that they can be mutated. Okay? And that's what that means, changing one of the values inside of it to something else. Strings, numbers, booleans, null, undefined, all those things. Those are all primitive values. They are what they are, right? You can't change, you can't do that. You just can't do that. Yeah, you just can't do that. There's more differences between complex and primitive data types as well, which we'll cover Monday, because it's more of a value reference kind of thing. Okay? We'll talk about that later. It's getting out of the scope of this lesson. Okay? But yeah, I would just really consider to take that as a rule. You know, primitive data types cannot be mutated, right? Any other questions? Yeah. If you what? Like what? Oh, like what does index of do? Like if I wrote like that, you get -1 because it's not in there. Do you remember that workshop question where you guys had to make your own function index of? You guys had to do that, right? That was like, I don't know when that was, but I think you guys did that already. When you use index of, even in strings, and you're looking for a specific character, and it goes through the entire string, if it can't find it, it returns -1. Because what is index -1? There is no index -1. It starts at 0. And that's what index of actually does under the hood. It is a built-in function, but what it actually is doing is looping through the array from start to finish looking for something. So index of behaves a lot like index of for strings, right? And another method that also comes from strings is, oh god, excuse me, is slice. Sam and Bilbo. If you guys remember slice, the first argument and the second argument, if you give it one, are numbers, and they reflect indexes. The first argument is inclusive, meaning it starts at index 1, including this element, takes it out, and gives us the rest, if you don't give anything else. If you give it a stopping point, like 2, we only get an array of Sam, because the second argument is not inclusive, okay? So it says, okay, this is at index 2, but we're not going to include this element. So we're going to take whatever we sliced out, And slice returns a copy of the array. Okay? It is not the same array. So, what does that mean? So, if I do let array of Sam equal to array of hobbits dot slice. Oh, actually, that wouldn't make sense to show you. Hobbits 2 is array of hobbits dot slice. If you don't give slice an argument, doesn't it just start from 0 and then go to the end? Right? And then I console.log array of hobbits, and then also array of hobbits dos. It's 2 arrays, right? But if I do array of hobbits at 1 is equal to Baggins, you see that array of hobbits is now Frodo, Baggins, Bilbo, but array of hobbits 2, which is an exact copy of it before I changed something, before I mutated that array, it is still Frodo, Sam, Bilbo. So slice makes a copy of the array and returns it. Okay? So you might be thinking like, big deal, so what? What if I did let array of hobbits 2 equal to array of hobbits? Isn't this the same thing? But what if I did array of hobbits 2, array of hobbits of 2 is now going to be, no, array of hobbits 2 at 2 is now going to be equal to Sam as well, 2 Sams. And if I console.log these things again, what happened? I changed array of hobbits 2 to Sam at the second index, right? But array of hobbits also changed. And this is something that we will get into on Monday. This is what I mean by reference and value. When you assign, since these are complex types, when you assign this to this, it's actually assigned its reference to the same array in memory, okay? And that's why mutating arrays is usually not good. Mutating data usually isn't good. Usually you want to make a copy of that data and then change that, which is why slice is extremely important. It's okay to not fully understand the entire reference thing, okay? But just know that this is a thing, okay? Also, let me just show you down here. If I console.log empty array triple equal empty array, you get false, okay? If I console.log array of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you also get false. Because these are 2 different arrays stored in memory. Okay? So just be cautious of that when you're working with your workshops today and tomorrow. We'll go more in, you will learn more in depth about this on Monday. With me. I'll be here. Okay? Just realize that that's a thing, alright? So, before I break to the slides, There are some methods that I want to show you that will be incredibly, incredibly useful when you work with arrays, okay? And there's 4 of them. And they all kind of do sort of the same thing, but not really at all. You have push, pop, shift, and unshift. You are going to remember these methods, and you are going to remember them very well. And if you don't remember them right now, you will by the end of this lesson, okay? If I do empty array dot push hello, and I console.log empty array is hello now. If I also push world, I get hello world. So, what is push doing? Push is something you dot off of a variable or an array, right? And it's a function. It's actually a function. Methods are actually functions. And what you pass in is any element. And what it does is it takes that element and pushes it into the back of the array. Okay? Pushes an element into the back of an array. Push has an opposite that takes something off of the array, out the back of the array. And that is pop. Pop takes no arguments, I'm pretty sure. So if I console.log, what is this? You get world. Pop returns the last value of the array. It returns it. And you know it returns something because I stored it in this variable, what is this? What is this is now equal to that string world. But what if I move this down here? Empty array doesn't have world anymore. Pop and push mutate arrays, okay? This array, empty array, no longer has the last element world on it because I removed it with pop. I also want you guys to be aware of something else. Push also returns a value. Oh, what the Huh? Oh. Two. What do you think this 2 is? The length. Push actually returns the new length after it pushes in that thing. It returns the length of the new array, okay? Just remember that. You don't I never use that aspect of push. I usually just use it to push things into an array from the back. But it actually does return a value, and it's the new length of the array. Whereas pop actually returns the element you take out of it. So push, you push things onto the back, and pop, you pop things off from the back. Does that make sense? Two more things that I said before. Is you have empty array. Oh my god, what the hell? Dot unshift world empty array dot unshift hello. Oh wait. That also returns a length. Bless you. But you see, I did world first and then hello, but I still get hello world in the array, right? Because what unshift does is it unshifts things onto the array. Now I know that doesn't like make English sense, like yeah, you unshift onto something, you know? But that's because unshift wasn't cleverly named. Because the way to take things off the front of the array is to shift them off. And the reason why it's called shift them off is because, yeah, you shift the hello off, but if this was an array of 1,000 things, if there was 1,000 indexes in this array, and you just shift once, everything in the array has to shift over an index. Right? If I just deleted hello, there wouldn't be like an empty null value here. World has to move over here. So if there was 1,000 things, 1,000 things have to move one place over. That's why people don't really use shift, because it takes more time than pop. Pop just takes one thing off and pops it off. Everything else in the array can stay in the same place. But in shift, everything has to actually move over. Right? And shift behaves like pop. It returns the thing you're shifting out. Any questions? Yeah.
Will that also modify the arrays? That is just
Yes. Push, pop, and also unshift and shift all mutate the array. So if I were to console.log empty array after I shift something, you only get world. So be careful when you do things like this. Sometimes it can be very powerful, and sometimes it can mess everything up, okay? When you modify original sets of data, just be wary of what you're doing. Also, you can reverse an array of hobbits if you ever want to do that. If you ever want to reverse something, you dot reverse and you get the reverse order. Ooh, interesting, right? That's another method. That's another built-in method. And I think that doesn't modify anything. Oh, it does? Is it actually? Yes, it does. Okay. Reverse also modifies the array. It also mutates the original value. It doesn't return a copy like slice does. Slice returns a copy. Everything else, well, not everything else, but like dot reversed does not. It reverses everything in place. When you ever see something that says in place, that means it doesn't make an extra array to put something into. When a definition of something means it reverses it in place, that means nothing else new is made, so you know that that value is actually being mutated. Push, pop, unshift, and shift mutate the arrays too. Slice returns a copy, okay? Yeah. What do you mean put something in the middle? There is a method called splice. Splice, I think you guys learn about tomorrow, since it's a little more complicated than slice. But splice is used for putting things in the middle of an array, and yes, it does modify the array. Yes. Yes.
I can see one example of using reverse as, how you click the button to arrange things alphabetical in the reverse order or something, when you click the button. So what if you're doing that person, it's actually modifying the array. But what if you have that hooked up to a database? Is it actually modifying the array in the database too?
So like the way like backend and front end stuff works is when the backend uses the front end data, that's just like that's like a copy of the data. It's like real data, but it's not linked in real time to the database. You know, I would have to send a request to that database, replacing all of it in the same.
But you typically want to reverse the data
In the database, no, not really.
But that's
You would do that on the
more
front end. Any questions? Before I go into slides, how do you guys feel about arrays? Are arrays not so bad? They just store a bunch of things. Oh yeah, also arrays are ordered. The order never changes. It's not going to randomly change. It is an ordered list, okay? Am I going too fast? Does anybody want me to repeat anything at all? I'm doing it a little faster because I think you guys would benefit more by spending more time on the workshop today. But if you want me to repeat anything else, let me know. I'm more than happy to stop and do some more stuff in REPL, okay? Okay?
Yep.
All right. All right, so in the slides, we're going to go what's an array. We're going to talk about the type of. We're going to look at array.isArray, bracket access and bracket assignment, the .length property, and a few basic methods. So what I talked about a little bit extra today, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of knowledge, okay? So what is an array? An array is a list-like data structure in JavaScript. Very basic array, numbers, is equal to an array of 3 elements that goes up to index 2. 1, 2, 3. Does that make sense? Right? Cool. Let names equal George John Thomas. Arrays can also store strings. Arrays can store anything, okay? We got this mixed bag over here. We have a number 30, the Boolean true, a string apples, the value none, and this thing, a variable. What is a variable? Oh, it was defined here, and it's a string, a value. The values inside of an array are called elements. So, is everyone good on that? Cool. So, what is the type of an array? So, we have let names equal George John Thomas. Type of names, you get object. Confusing, right? Arrays are actually objects in JavaScript, okay? So type of, I won't say useless, because I don't think anything in JavaScript is useless, but to find out if something's an array, you would never use type of. If you ever think you're going to be getting arrays into a function, you want to check using something else. And that is array.isArray, right? You have let names, George John Thomas, console.log array.isArray, and you pass in names. You pass that variable into isArray, okay? And this is off the global array object. Cool? And that returns, oh, and then like here, we pass in a string, I am not an array, a single string. And you get true and false. It returns true if that thing you pass into it is indeed an array, and false if it is not. Makes complete sense, right? No tricks. Everything is like very easy to understand, right? Cool. If it's not, don't be ashamed and ask me a question. Okay. So now let's talk about bracket access. So to access elements in an array, is the same way you would access a character in a string. Use brackets and the index as a number, right? Corresponding to the position of the element in the array. And indexes in arrays work the same way as indexes in strings. Start at 0, and the last index is 1 less than the length, okay? So console.log names at 0, names at 1, names at 2, names at 3. George John Thomas, undefined. If this happens in strings too, if you try to access a character at an index that is beyond the length of the string, you will get undefined. The same thing happens with arrays. There is nothing there. Any questions? Yeah.
I forgot, so there was minus 1. There's like, if there's like no element in the array, and here undefined. What
That-
was minus 1?
Minus 1 refers to the method index of.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Index of actually looks for the element you pass into it, right? And if it doesn't exist, it returns -1, because -1 is not an index. Otherwise, it will return the index where that element is. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Bracket assignment. Use brackets and the assignment operator to assign new values to index positions in an array. George John Thomas. Names at 0 is now going to be Washington, 1 Adams, 2 Jefferson, and you get Washington, Adams, Jefferson. You are reassigning the values at those indexes. I feel like this makes more sense to me than the fact that you can't reassign letters and strings, right? This makes more sense. Personally, I don't know. Maybe this makes less sense, but you know, that's because these are mutatable data types, data structures. And strings are primitives, so you cannot change their index values, okay? Cool. Remember in an earlier lecture we said only complex types can be mutated? Changing the elements in an array is an example of mutating a value. We can't mutate a string in the same way. I just showed you this. Just showed you this, right? You have the array, and it's a bunch of letters, right? B-R-A-C-E, right? Brace. And then you have a string, that's just a string, brace. If you do array of 0 is now going to be equal to the string G, and then you do string at 0 is now going to be equal to the string G, and you console log both these things, you see the array is grace now, right? But you see the string is still brace. You cannot mutate those values. This is a fact, and just try and remember that, okay? Any questions? Yeah.
Actually, it's not a question about the stuff. It's slide order.
Sure.
The reason slide 8 is dot length property. It's not this slide. This is for materials.
Oh, yeah, these slides, there's a little bit extra in these slides.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Any more questions? Cool. So here's the dot length property slide. So arrays like strings have a length property, and it's 3, right? An array of 3 elements, the dot length returns 3. Right? Very, very similar, if not exactly the same as strings, okay? I hope nobody's confused by this. But if you are, don't worry. It's fine. So now let's talk about some methods. So arrays have a lot of methods that are very powerful in the ways that you can modify them, okay? So .push takes one or more elements and adds them to the end of the array. Yes, it can take more than one element. Push returns the new length of the array. So if we do let new length equal names.push James, and then we console log these two things, names, George John Thomas, we push in James, names is now George John Thomas James. But we set this to a variable new length, and we got 4. Because that's what push returns. It returns the new length of the array after you push the element in. Does that make sense? Are you guys sure? Push is very useful, okay? As you can see, it just pushes things at the end. Pop is a little different. Pop removes one element from the end of the array, and it returns the removed element. So George John Thomas, let Jefferson equal names.pop. You see names is missing Thomas, but Jefferson is now equal to that Thomas that was removed from the array, and yes, it is the exact same Thomas. Push and pop. Push things onto the back, pop it off the back, okay? Remember that. Push things onto the back and pop things off from the back. Push things onto the back, pop it off the back. Cool? Any questions? Yeah.
So push into one more.
Yeah, so,
Pop.
yes. So push, I didn't show you this, but you see these parentheses, right? That kind of makes it sound like a function, right? Which methods are, okay? And how do you put in more arguments? You just separate elements by commas, and you can put as many arguments as you want, and it will be in that order added onto the back of your. Any other questions? Cool. So shift. Shift works like pop, but it removes the first element instead. And it's called shift because the indices for every element in the array are shifted over by 1. So this works the same way. Names.shift takes George off the front, and then John is not index 1 anymore, it's now index 0, right? It's not like you're deleting this part and just putting the bracket here. Everything is actually moving over, okay? And Jefferson and Washington is now equal to George. It works the same way as pop, except it's from the opposite side. It's from the front of the array. And like shift, you also have unshift. Unshift adds one or more elements to the front of the array. So let names equal George John Thomas. Let new length names.unshift King George III. We get King George III, George John Thomas, in that array. And 4, just like push, it returns the new length. This is starting to make sense, right? I mean, there's 4 new methods. I don't expect you guys to remember them right off the bat if I asked you again in like 20 minutes. But like, they're here. It's just something you kind of have to remember. Like some methods are easier to remember than others. You don't have to memorize every method I tell you, but all the methods you learn in this course, in Bootcamp Prep, are very common, and you will be using them over and over again when you're solving larger problems. So even if you don't remember them now, I guarantee you, you will remember them in the future, okay? So don't stress about it. Index of. Index of is also an array method, and it works the same way as the string method of the same name. So you see, if we console log names.index of George, we got 0, because George is the first element in this array. It is at the 0th index. Alexander does not exist in this array. And that's why we get -1, because there is no -1 index. So it just returns -1, so we always know if it's not in the array, we will always get -1, no matter what, if we do index of. Cool? Slice. Slice is also an array method and works the same way as the string method of the same name. So, we have names, George John Thomas, 1-term presidents, names.slice, start at 1, include 1, stop at 2, do not include 2, right? And that's why we have John. But you see, names has not been changed. That's because slice returns a copy of the array and it does not mutate, okay? It starts at index 1, John, includes that, goes until index 2 and does not include that. So we get only John, only the middle element. But names has not been changed. Yes?
If there would be only one, what would be the outcome? I mean, if we're not including number 2, do we actually need it?
So if we don't include number 2, it starts at 1 and includes everything after that.
Oh,
If you don't include anything, it just gives you the whole array. But it is a copy. It is not the same. So if you were to make a copy of names and then push a bunch of stuff into it, then that would be that, but names would still be George John Thomas. You know? Whereas if you set something equal to names and you push something into that variable, names would also be changed. So just be cautious of that, okay? Cool. Slice is also an array method and works the same way as a string. Yeah. Yeah, so this just proves my point saying that slice makes a copy of the original array. Because here we have names copy at 2, we are now assigning Paul. 0, 1, 2. So that means Thomas is now going to be Paul. And then we're also going to push into that copy a string Ringo. So if we console log names and names copy, we have George John Thomas, but then we also have George John Paul Ringo. You see what they did there? Cool. Oh, I didn't show you this. That's my bad. So dot includes takes a value and returns true if the value is an element in the array. This is very straightforward. Names dot includes George, Alexander, true, false, right? It dots off an array because it's an array method. Pass it a value, and it looks through that array for that value, and it gives you true or false. This and index of kind of do the same thing, right? But instead of false, you get -1, and instead of true, you get any positive number or 0. Right? Personal preference, what you would rather do. Does the same thing. It looks for an element, returns true if it's there, and false if it's not. This is more plain English. So do whatever you guys want. This exists though, includes exists. Any questions on includes? Cool. And the reverse. Reverse mutates the original array, reversing the order of its elements. It does it in place. It doesn't create anything new. So, names.reverse, now names, we have Thomas, John, George. It is reversed. I don't really have anything else to say about reverse. Kind of just says everything right there. Are there any questions on reverse? Includes, or push, or pop, or slice, or index of, or shift, or unshift? Yeah.
I guess I'm still a little confused, like with reverse and the database thing. If you have an array and you're working on the front end and you're using arrays, aren't you using the arrays from the database typically?
Yeah, but the front end isn't like connected in real time. It's not connected at all, right?
Right.
If I send, this is like kind of like out of the scope of the lesson. Ignore me if you want to. If I send like a GET request to the server, the database spits out like an array. It's not like linked.
Oh, then you're
You know?
taking
It's
that
kind of like a copy. Yeah.
copy.
Yeah. And I can do whatever I want with it. I can delete it, but it's still in the database, right?
Right.
The only way you can modify database is with a request or fetch request. You know? It needs to be a call with the server. Ignore them. Any other questions? here's an example. Let's say that all of these workshops you guys have been doing, you've been setting like let result string equal to empty string. What if I said I wanted the answer to be an array? So you say result array equal to an empty array. You can't plus equals an array. So how do you get things onto that new empty array that you made? Push, 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 push.
That's because we're working this way. In
Well,
real
right.
life, you would be pulling
Well,
like
in
real
real,
usernames like that, right?
well, sure, but like I don't know. Every application has its own uses. Like maybe if you get like this array of data and you wanted every even index and every odd index in one separate array and the other one, you wouldn't pop it off, but you would push it. You would make two new arrays, push it on, and then send another. I don't know. It's just
It's more for viewing, like your viewing pleasure. Like it's not really manipulating the database.
No, it's not.
You want to see a list of something reversed, that's
But it's
fine.
like for creating new data without
Yeah.
mutating old data. Push and pop, because push and pop does mutate the array, but it's very useful if you just make an empty array and then push whatever you want into it, or shift everything on, however you guys want. Any other questions? Any other questions? So as a recap, what's an array? Went over it. It's an ordered list that can store anything. Type of an array is an object. So we use array.isArray to see if something is an array or is not. We talked about bracket access and bracket assignment. You access elements the same way you do as strings, but this time you can actually mutate and change what is at those indexes, right? You can replace the properties. We talked about how it has a .length property and some other basic methods, like push, pop, shift, unshift, and includes, and slice, and index of, and reverse. And you guys will learn about more methods tomorrow. Isn't that great? But methods are cool because that means that saves you a lot of time, right? You don't have to write more for loops in your functions to look for things and return something if it's true or not. Make 50 helper functions, all right? They just exist in JavaScript, so that's kind of nice, okay? When you guys get better and get good, though, you're going to have to start realizing that all these built-in methods actually have their own time complexity, right? Because like I said, index of is literally just moving through the whole array from start to finish, right? You have to know when you later on what these things are actually doing under the hood. I don't know everything that happens in it, so don't ask me. All you can. I'll just do it from. So, any final questions before you guys take like a 5-minute break and then I'll flag out pairs? Are you guys feeling okay about this? Alright, hope you are. If you don't, just ask me for help, or post in the thing, in the post a help ticket, and yeah. Go take a break.